We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 6 o'clock, so we have a very packed agenda. So I want to welcome everyone here. My name is Joel Miller. I am the Bike Share Program Manager for the City Department of Transportation. And thank you for coming. This is an exciting new program. I want to quickly go over just what we want to get out of this today. We first want to update you all on what we've been doing and what we've heard so far in our outreach. We want to give everybody else also an opportunity to hear directly from the vendors and also from the city of Portland, which has been nice enough to show up. And then we're also collecting comments. We have an open survey, and we'll be collecting written questions that we might ask. And then also, if you have any other feedback, we're collecting written comments as well. So we want to continue collecting that information from everybody. And our agenda, this is going to be kind of the speed dating of agendas here. We're starting with opening comments. That's what I'm doing now. And we'll also hear from our Director Zimbabwe and Councilmember Pacheco. We're going to give you an update on where we are and what we're doing. And we'll have a panel discussion with the vendors. And then go through public comment, questions, and then have some time for everyone to interact with us and the vendors as well. I do want to talk about that we do have some overall program objectives. We want scooter share when it comes to Seattle to complement our bike share system, not supplant it. We see a lot of value in having both. And we really want to prioritize safety. That's very, very important for the city of Seattle. We want to make sure that what's happening isn't adding undue carnage to the streets. We want to prioritize equity, accessibility, make sure that this program is meeting our city's goals, and then protect our city and the residents as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce SDOT Director Sam Zimbabwe.
All right, good evening, folks. I'm Sam Zimbabwe, I'm the Director of SDOT. I just want to say a couple words in welcoming everyone here tonight. I want to thank the scooter operators for being here and being willing to talk about how they work and really share openly. I want to thank Portland for coming up and sharing their experiences. I worked at the District Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. when we launched Scooter Share almost 2 years ago now, about 18 months ago. And I've been here in Seattle since January. So I felt like it was important as we think about how to design a program to not start with preconceived notions of what a program should be, but really take some time to hear from people and listen to what thoughts, concerns, and how a program should be designed and operated. We've been very clear from Mayor Durkin right on down about our focus on safety, on equity, on creating a fair permitting system for this program, and really thinking about how safety works for pedestrians, for users of scooters, and for folks with disabilities. So how we can design a program that works for everybody, and if that's possible, and how we can think about what concerns are, how we manage the right of way, how we manage a program like this to be successful from the very beginning. So this is really important for us tonight to hear from folks, to have a chance for folks to interact with companies that are operating in other cities and hear about what's worked and what hasn't worked, and think about how we design this program from the beginning. So with that, I want to introduce somebody who's been a tireless champion for us to do this right and to do this kind of engagement and also do it with speed and desire to get something operational, and that's Councilmember Pacheco, who in his short time on the council has been really a tireless champion for thinking about how we can do this program and do it right. So with that, Councilmember Pacheco.
I also do the PowerPoints. My name is Abel Pacheco. I am a District 4 City Council member, and I lived in Seattle since 2010. I'm the only car-free council member, so I take my mobility options very seriously. Despite being born and raised in the small town of LA, one of the most car-centric cities in America, in 2015, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life, which was to give up my car. And I've been getting around since by using public transit, bike share, walking, and the occasional ride share. I'm also privileged to live in a part of Seattle that has frequent and reliable transit options that I live near. And I happen to live near the Burke-Gilman, which provides a safe place for me to just bike and walk, and eventually, we're going to be scooting, so that I can give up my car without drastic or negative impacts on my life. That's why I've been a champion for making public transit more accessible, for expanding our micromobility options, and our infrastructure like bike lanes and on-street parking corrals, and for bringing scooter share programs to Seattle. I'm very proud that Seattle became the very first city in the country to adopt a free-floating bike share program. Every morning, I happen to be able to ride a bike to the light rail, and I think that that's how we're going to move around in the future. As a leading tech city that is growing in population by the day, we should continue to champion sustainable innovation. As a city, one of our top priorities should be working to combat climate change and putting more people in the position of giving up their car as I did. I often tell people that this is not about a war on cars, but rather what we can all collectively do to fight climate change. There are so many places across the city, in parts of South Seattle and parts of North Seattle, that don't show diverse public and shared transportation options that the neighborhood I live in has. And bringing more micromobility options to Seattle, like e-scooters, helps begin to alleviate those discrepancies. We want people of all backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses to have the ability to utilize shared micromobility options safely and without breaking the bank. Since I've been working on these issues, my office has been working really closely with disability advocates, Cascade Bicycle Club, and transportation and climate change activists as well. Some of them are here tonight, and want to personally thank as well for their work with our office and on these issues. Myself, leadership at SDOT, the mayor's office, share a vision for Seattle where this is not a zero-sum game between pedestrians, bikes, scooters, cars, and that we can redesign our streets to accommodate all modes of transportation. By the end of this year, SDOT will have added 1,500 micromobility parking spaces around the city in 2019. And we must continue to invest in on-street parking corrals on every available block so that we reduce the clutter on our sidewalks. My office has been working during the budget season to get more funding for these parking corrals. By bringing more micromobility options like e-scooters and innovative investments in our transportation infrastructure that are necessary for a growing and adapting city, I know that we will be moving around more car-free in the future. More folks like myself who can give up the option or have the option of giving up the car will do so, and reduce the congestion on our street, and collectively we'll do something together about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you again to Director Zimbabwe and Councilmember Pacheco. All right, so now we're going to move into kind of the meat of the program as we go into what we're doing as the city. Before we go directly into that, I do want to remind everyone that we're going to be collecting written questions and comments. And so if you didn't grab a piece of paper or scratch paper on the way in, we will go around and pass more out during this. We'll collect them throughout the panel discussion so that in those last 20 minutes we can have some audience submitted questions as well. And also there's food, so it doesn't look very touched. And so please eat it, take it home, do what you need to do. So yeah, thank you very much. And then with that, I'm handing it over to Stefan Winkler. He is our Scooter Share Program Manager. He's going to update you on what we've been doing.
Thank you, Joel. Good evening, everyone. So tonight, let's see here, where's the clip? All right, great. So tonight what I'd like to do is talk a bit about what we've been doing since the mayor made her announcement in May. And I'd like to cover the cities that we've researched, stakeholders that we've talked to, some of the feedback that we've been getting, the buckets of the themes that they fall into, and then what the next steps are. Before I get into that, what I'd like to remind you guys of is that there is a way to still provide feedback. Right now, the easiest way to do it is to grab one of those surveys that you might have seen as you're coming in the door on the table there. So that's one way. Write down whatever your comments are, your feedback is, and you can hand it in directly to any one of us. Another way is to go to our website on the SDOT blog, specifically the scooter share section of that blog. There is a link there where there's an online survey. So please tell everyone that you know about it, anyone that cares about micromobility or just transportation or just how we run our city. So in early summer, we began researching scooter share programs and pilots across the country. We really wanted to understand how other cities were approaching issues around safety, parking, and equity. We talked with several cities across the country, like Austin, Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., of course. And we focused in on the West Coast peer cities of Portland, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Los Angeles, due to their proximity, topography that they share with us in some cases, and the climate in others, and also some of the shared values. In the outreach that we started in August, it was really important to us to hear insights from a wide range of groups, just based on the experience that we've had with bike share. We realized that something like this can impact people in a lot of different ways. So you can see some of them here. I've got a couple of slides. I'll kind of walk through some of these. In the safety and health category, our conversations with groups like King County Public Health and Harbor View centered on gleaning insights into how to approach a scooter share permit with a medical safety lens, and as well as discussing how to understand and evaluate the health and injury impacts of a possible scooter share pilot. We also met with Seattle Police Department and to discuss safety and the rules of the road. Modal boards, the feedback that we got from them was instrumental. We talked with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Board, both of those. It was instrumental in framing our view of parking and riding locations. And I'll get more into some of that later on. Public agencies, of course, we wanted to make sure that we were being good partners. We talked with King County Metro, Sound Transit. We wanted to assure that we were aligned in our vision and in utilizing scooter share to improve connections to transit and making those seamless and orderly. And our conversations with the Department of Parks and Recs assured that we were communicating in the same language when we were talking about how our permits would affect the parks. Going backwards. So our conversations with disability rights, transportation advocacy groups, transportation equity groups, really centered around how the policy would affect people with disabilities, low-income populations, and people of color. We learned a lot of interesting things in those conversations. And our conversations with the downtown districts were focused on how this would impact downtown areas and the waterfront, and primarily focused on parking issues and how to geofence possibly certain areas that are especially dense and crowded. So the themes that these fell into were quite basically three things: safe riding, safe parking, and equity and access. Before I get into that, I want to back up for a second and mention that we've also received a lot of emails. We received feedback through some of the surveys that have been out there. And again, I'll remind you that you can go and fill out a survey that until November 15th. And we'll continue to be talking to other communities and other neighborhoods as we move forward and get more solid in terms of the framing of the permit, as well as understanding some of the components of it. We'll be coming around and talking to a lot of these same groups again, as well as groups or neighborhoods that are in some of the outer edges of the city, because we want to make sure that this is servicing all in Seattle. So I want to get first into safety riding concerns. So sidewalks, most everyone, when it came to talking about riding scooters on sidewalks, but specifically the Pedestrian Advisory Board and disability groups, agreed that riding scooters on crowded sidewalks placed all pedestrians, including people with disabilities, seniors, and children in harm's way. They described, and I remember a conversation where someone described walking down a sidewalk and feeling very uncomfortable about having to be constantly aware of some sort of wheeled device rushing by them, a gust of wind. And so that's something that we heard pretty much across the board. Now, bike lanes, riding scooters and bike lanes, just to kind of frame this, the current Seattle Municipal Code states that a foot scooter can basically only be ridden on roadways, shoulders of the roadways, and definitely not on sidewalks and not on bike lanes. So bike lanes, most everyone, including transportation advocacy groups, agreed that riding scooters in the bike lane was appropriate, as long as the speed that the scooters were traveling at was similar to the speed of bicycles traveling in bike lanes. When we got into conversations about Ontario streets, many expressed concern for the safety of people on scooters that travel at much lower speeds than vehicle traffic. King County Public Health agreed with most that bike lanes are more appropriate than those areas. But then others noted that often at the edges of the city, there are no bike lanes, and that's often where you find a lot of these higher speed arterial roads. So there was some challenge in trying to determine how to handle that. And obviously we weren't trying to come up with decisions at that point. We just really wanted to hear people's feedback. And we got a lot of opinions on this, and in some cases, it's a very challenging subject to address. As you can see, it's very complicated. We take it very seriously in terms of making sure that not only pedestrians are safe, but that also people who are riding these scooters are also safe. We have a big hill to climb as it relates to that. We take that very seriously. We also talked about head injuries and helmets. We talked with Harborview about how to increase helmet usage and educate people about safe riding etiquette. Parking was a big issue. It was raised a lot in our outreach. It seemed to garner the most amount of feedback from people and the different organizations that we talked with. Our conversations with disability groups really highlighted how much of an impact misparked bikes or scooters can have on the daily life of a person who might be blind or low vision. I remember hearing someone speak about how they can be seriously injured when their walking stick is stuck within the spokes or kind of knock something over that they didn't expect to have there. Also, a person can have their day completely disrupted. A person who is with a disability and unable to move around easily can have their whole day disrupted if a bike or a scooter is parked in a way that it blocks their access to a building or to get across the street. So this is something that we take very seriously. We noted this, and something that we want to make sure that we continue to put as a priority in terms of thinking about how we draft policy around where scooters can be parked. Our conversations with the downtown areas like DSA and Pioneer Square Lands focused on how to assure that areas are kept organized, and that one interesting thing that I noted is also that visitors, not only people that lived here, but visitors understood the rules, where to park things at. Because that's a lot of visitors come and visit areas like Pioneer Square, in the downtown area. And so that was something that was raised as a very important thing for us to keep in mind, the education around that. Conversations with the transportation equity organizations focused on affordability for low-income people, people of color. Another important concern was how enforcement can be equitable, how it could inequitably impact people of color. There was a lot of talk around how do we enforce, and this was sort of a running theme with a lot of conversations. And inevitably, it always came back to making sure that this enforcement was done in an equitable way across the entire table. When speaking with disability groups, we heard more than once that all of these new devices that are coming to Seattle, they're for people who don't have disabilities. Like, where are the actual devices that are going to help us move around? And I heard that a couple of times in different types of conversations. So the concern is that enough is not being done to help people with disabilities to make sure that they can move around the city easily and connect with transit. And that is actually one of our objectives. Finally, we heard from people who really supported our current bike share system. There is concern that scooters might disrupt that, or that somehow it might displace it in a way. And so we've really heard a lot about wanting to create a scooter share system that complemented our current bike share system and continue to grow it. We agree with that. So what I'd like to talk about next is sort of the next steps, what we're going to be doing next. Again, there's a survey out there that you can fill out there on the table, and you can still go online and fill one out until November 15th. And even after that, we're still looking for feedback. You can always email scooter share at seattle.gov. So that's something that we'll continue to do. We'll continue outreach and collecting evidence from the survey. We'll be continuing with our State Environmental Policy Act Review, which is called SEPA for short. That's basically a review to make sure that, or evaluate the impact that scooters will have on public spaces in Seattle. So we're currently in sort of the midst of looking at that. And then, finally, we'll be moving towards drafting permit requirements. So far, we've been talking with people around sort of the framework of the permits, the goals, scope, the scale. And what we heard a lot in our outreach was that it's really difficult to give any feedback when we're just saying, hey, how do you feel about these issues? Because it's not here. And we weren't really giving any sort of solutions to it, which was fine. We really wanted to start from a place where we weren't prompting anything, and we were just trying to hear as much as we could. But in the next phase that we're moving into now, we will be drafting a lot of these parts of the permit, things like the safety requirements, parking, equity, operational practices, fines, identification, things like this. And then we'll be coming back to a lot of the groups that we talk to, as well as others, and having conversations about what they think about some of the things that we're considering. So concludes my update on where we are right now, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joel.
Thank you, Stefan. If I can invite the panel to come up, your seats are all labeled, and so I hope you know where to sit. And then I just want to also remind folks, we have questions. Does anyone not have a question card that would like one? Please put your hand in the air. There we go, we got a couple. So again, we'll be collecting written questions and then asking a selection of them at the end of this. So this is your chance to ask a question. I am going to walk these over. Yeah. Okay, so now we're moving into the speed dating section. We're really excited about this. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We are going to keep this moving, so I'm just going to pass it off. We are asking for 60-second introductions from each panel member, and we are going to start down in my end with Portland.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Sherman. I work at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. I play two different roles. I currently lead our new mobility program where I'm developing the Bureau's strategy for how we respond to autonomous vehicles, car share, bike share, scooters, those types of things. I'm also wearing a second hat of being the interim project manager for our e-scooter program, and that's really the capacity that I'm here with you all today.
All right, next actually will be down Maurice with Bird. Someone could pass him a mic, please.
Here we go. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Great to see you. Maurice Henderson with Bird. We are a e-share mobility company. Started in 2017 around September, so we're just to celebrate our second anniversary as a company. We actually originated the e-scooter share part of this business. We believe in trying to reduce the number of car trips, the climate impacts that we're having on our environment, bringing a low-cost solution to cities across the globe. We're in about 100+ cities globally. We have reduced emissions or our climate impact goals in terms of the numbers of carbon pounds that we've removed. Just in LA, for example, 17 million. And we've got tens of millions of rides and wonderful stories, making sure that we've connected people both to transit, to jobs, to schools, etc., and making sure that we're hearing from communities. Thank you.
And next up is Jump.
Hello everyone, my name is Keon and I lead the operation of Jump Bikes in Seattle. A quick history about Jump. Jump was founded as a social bicycle almost 10 years ago. They have been developing bikes for bike share programs over the past 10 years. In 2017, a social bicycle was rebranded as Jump and was later acquired in 2018 by Uber. And over the past year, we have been scaling both our bike share, e-bike share, I should say, and e-scooter share. And we launched in Seattle late 2018, so almost a year. We recently hit 1 million rides in Seattle, which we celebrated, and we are looking forward to continuing our partnership with the City of Seattle.
Great, and actually, if you guys didn't mind turning around, whose slide is this?
It's Lime.
Great, thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Katie Stevens. I handle government relations for Lime. Really thrilled to be here. We, as you may have realized, Seattle was one of our very first markets with bikes here, and how things have evolved, how quickly they've evolved. We're a little over 2 years old. Really excited to have an opportunity to serve the city with scooter share. We are working to reimagine our cities with the wonder of mobility. What does that mean? We lose about 140 hours in congestion each year, and we want to give some of that time back to Seattleites. And so we look at mode shift, really shifting those car trips via other alternative options like scooters. We know about 1/3 of those are shifting, right? 1/3 of all car trips are being switched because there is a scooter, an alternative mode of transportation that's even more popular than bikes. So anyway, really thrilled to be here. Look forward to having a conversation. Thank you.
Okay, and then Matt from Mojo.
Good evening. My name is Matt Tola. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Partnerships for Ojo Electric, a California-based electric rideshare company. Our philosophy as a company is very simple. We like to collaborate with cities and its constituents to produce and bring smart mobility solutions to your city. So we're here tonight to learn from you, learn from the city. We're thrilled to be a part of this. We're one of the smaller guys up here on stage. We currently operate in 3 cities and continue to expand our rideshare program, and look forward to speaking and learning more about Seattle's needs this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Donovan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donovan Higbee. I'm a government relations manager at Razor Scooters. One of the first things that people will ask me, are you the same Razor that made the kick scooter that I rode as a kid growing up and that hit my ankle all the time? Yes, we are the exact same company. We are not a separate division, a separate entity. We're the same Razor that you've known for 20 years. So scooters are in our blood. We design all of our scooters in-house. The same designers who design our shared scooters are the ones who have been in our team from the beginning. So we take our scooters very seriously, and safety is always our top priority in our designs every day. And we are very deliberate about how we, in the cities we work with, and our growth and our footprint in the community. So we look forward to still being the scooter company that you've known for so long, and working with the communities, including Seattle, that we look forward to entering soon. So thank you.
Okay, Braden.
Good evening. My name is Braden Matumacall. I am one of the team members at Shared. We're a local founded Seattle company, actually, that is probably one of the youngest here, but we're taking this approach on looking at the space in general and how we can solve a lot of the existing problems with, an entirely different approach to what a traditional scooter can be. We do a lot of things different. We really focus on safety. We focus on hiring locally, not really using independent contractors, and really engaging with the community. Everything we do comes back to really serving the city and being a part of the community. So we're looking forward to being a part of Seattle if the current program permits it. And thank you.
And Tim.
Hey, Tim Alborg, Spin. Thanks so much, Joel and Jacob, for being here tonight. To my colleagues from the other companies, just real quickly, since I have limited time, I wanted to talk a little bit about how Spin is different. And so if you look to the right of that slide, you'll sort of see a couple of projects that we're really excited about, where we partnered with the cities of Salt Lake City and Denver to create more safe streets. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the Salt Lake City example, we recreated an intersection with the Department of Public Works and the city to slow down vehicles and to create a more safe and welcoming space for bicyclists, pedestrians, the scooter riders. Bottom right, Denver, we created the first ever parklet competition that included scooter design integrated into the designs themselves. And then the bottom left corner in Tampa, this is an example of these dedicated parking spaces. We call them spin hubs that we have in cities across the country. And so, looking at a couple of slides earlier regarding, cluttered sidewalks and what have you, this is Spin's solution to help decrease the clutter we see sometimes on sidewalks in our cities.
Great, and finally Ben.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Story. I'm with Wheels. We are one of the newer entrants into the micromobility space. Been around for a little less than a year, operating in 6 cities, and excited to learn a lot more about Seattle's needs. The 3 things I want to focus on about Wheels is safety, sustainability, and accessibility. On the safety front, we are proactively working on helmet technology, happy to talk more about it later, to encourage the adoption of helmets with riders. We also, our form factor is a small bike, seated. We think that the larger wheelbase makes it easier to navigate uneven surfaces. On the sustainability front, we're using swappable batteries, which means our bikes can stay out in the field and don't require sort of coming into homes or centrally for any recharging. Completely modular design makes our repair model in cities that we can extend the life of these bikes for a long time. So a big focus on sustainability. And then lastly on accessibility, we find that demographically we see about 50-50 male-female adoption, which we think is unique for within the space. About 30% of our riders are over the age of 35. We think a lot of that is based on the seated form factor, the comfort, and so we think that there's a lot of advantages for people with physical limitations.
Fantastic. Actually, first of all, you guys mostly all stayed under 60 seconds. I am blown away. I never would have expected that. So thank you. Good job. We're going to move into the panel discussion now. We're going to keep this pace quick. But we're actually going to start out with a big softball for our friends down in Portland. For Jacob. Really just, you're in your second pilot. You already did one. You evaluated it. What'd you learn?
Thanks, Joel. Whoa, hot mic. I think we learned a lot of things through our first pilot. So as you said, we're in the middle of our second pilot. I think at the end of our first pilot, we learned kind of a couple of kind of top line takeaways. First, I think we learned from a representative citywide poll that we conducted that most Portlanders viewed e-scooters favorably. We also learned that many Portlanders were using e-scooters for transportation purposes. Some people reported they were using them for exercise, but the vast majority of people said they were actually using them to get from one point in their world to another. We also learned a lot about mode shift, and that e-scooter users were telling us they were using scooters to replace driving trips as well as Uber and Lyft trips, which was something that we found particularly interesting. And the stats differ a lot between Portlanders and visitors to Portland. So almost 50% of visitors to Portland told us that they would have used an Uber or Lyft or taken a car if it had not been for a scooter. And those are some things that interest us from a climate and congestion kind of perspective. We also found that e-scooter users really do prefer riding on low-speed streets and in bike lanes. We think a lot about these new mobility services needing new infrastructure, but sometimes that infrastructure is just a bike lane, or more bike lanes, or protected bike lanes. These are some of the things that we're thinking about as we move forward. We're also really excited to learn that e-scooters helped attract new users to active transportation. When we surveyed respondents, 74% of e-scooter users said they had never used our shared bike program before, and 42% of users said that they had weren't bicycle commuters. So what we're seeing there is expanding the pie, getting people out of automobiles and into the streets in more often than not, more efficient ways.
Thank you for that. As Stefan spoke about earlier, we are, as a city, really concerned about the potential safety impacts of scooters, especially in a city like Seattle. We have hills, we have rain, we have dark, and we're considering how best to approach this. So this is actually back to you, Jacob. I know that you did a study as part of that first pilot, coordinated with the Multnomah County Health Department. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned there?
Yes. And I think for anybody in the audience, you can find a lot of the work that we've done on our website. We've got a website with a catchy handle, escooterpdx.com. We published in early January 2019 what the New York Times said was one of the most kind of robust analysis of the impacts of scooters on a city to date. And in the partnership that we had with our county health department, we really found, as they looked through medical records, we found that most injuries weren't severe enough to warrant kind of emergency transportation, so needing an ambulance to get medical care. We also learned that most of the injuries were from people falling off the scooters, and falling off the scooters typically in the first or second or third time they've ever used one before. We also learned that about 5% of the total crashes occurred in the period were scooter crashes compared to auto crashes. And I think we saw and are continuing to be excited about as the form factor changes, form factor being a very wonky term, but as you're starting to see kind of new shapes and sizes of scooters, I think we're really excited about what we're seeing with seated scooters, particularly because more people who are bicyclists are used to them and understand kind of how they work.
Thank you. Tim, so you operate in a couple cities that share some characteristics with Seattle. San Francisco is very hilly, Portland's got a lot of wet weather. How are your scooters handling those challenges?
Thank you for the question. First thing, Spin is committed to safety, so I think this is really at the front of what we think about when we operate in any city, whether it's San Francisco with the hilly topography, Portland with maybe some more wet weather, in Seattle, which has some wet weather as well. Really, when you think about wet weather, I think the first thing you got to think about is whether you're in a car, whether you're on a bike, whether you're on a scooter. you really want to consider the environment you're in. So you need extra stopping time, for example, when you're on any sort of vehicle, whether it be a bicycle or a scooter. In terms of creating a more safe environment, I showed the slide earlier where we're partnering with cities to create more safe urban infrastructure through tactical urban projects. And so that's an important thing. And then the next thing I would say is, as a company, we're really investing in the vehicles themselves. So if you look at the back of the room, you'll see we have one of our Segway Max scooters. And this scooter is definitely a more durable device vehicle than what we've had in the past. When you think about this vehicle, it's got dual braking, including a rear brake that's an e-brake and regenerative. And then even we did some research here about Seattle. We found out that this vehicle would really be quite well, would really work quite well for the hilly topography of Seattle. So it can handle hills up to 20% grade. And I think you only have a few of those here in Seattle that actually surpass that. So thinking about the device itself, thinking about how as a company we can invest in these devices, but also thinking about how we can partner with the cities.
Thank you very much. Maurice, if you can pass that mic down. Kind of same question for Bird. How do your devices and your new device handle hills, weather, and things like that?
I think this one. Yeah, so we're also operating in San Francisco and Portland, and as I mentioned, a number of other cities globally. We deal with all kinds of weather conditions, topography issues around cities. Our vehicle, the Bird 1 that we brought here this evening, is one of our newest designs. In just the 8 months that I've been at Bird, we've invested in 4 different form factors since I've been there, including a seated scooter, which is the Bird Cruiser, which we're actually now testing in Los Angeles at the moment, as well as in Santa Monica. So to the point that was made earlier, we've been iterating and learning from the use cases that we've seen in Portland with the wet conditions, in San Francisco with the hills. We invested in merging with the company this summer, Scoot. That's our brand that we run in the San Francisco market. We also use a lock tube form for dealing with clutter issues. So we're locking the bikes. It's the one market that we do that in. We've tested it in a few others. So I think the big thing for Bird, and I think for the industry in general, is that we are willing to iterate, to learn from mistakes, to invest in R&D in real ways to make sure that safety is that #1 priority for Bird, and I think for the industry.
Thank you very much. Braden was shared. You've taken a different approach, especially if we're talking about wonky terms like form factor. Can you talk a little bit about how your device, your scooter, addresses some of those same concerns?
Yeah, so after the panel, you guys will get a look at it, but we have taken this approach sort of having a vehicle with a much larger tire profile. We've come to find that, especially living in the Pacific Northwest and sort of designing these things with our sort of general area in mind, that with a larger tire profile, you get a lot of benefits. One, on the safety standpoint, with wider wheels, these vehicles that we've developed are much more naturally akin to balancing. So for riders that might not be able to balance and ride a kick scooter, it's much easier to ride one of our shared scooters that will just naturally stay stable as you're going down the road. The other benefit is that we have treaded tires that are able to kick up rain, so they're much safer in wet conditions. We use dual braking, which are traditionally larger brakes than any other operators, just because we have a larger vehicle, we can fit them. And we see even in wet conditions that these vehicles still stop within very similar distances to dry conditions because of all those things coming into play. So everything coming together, we've really just focused down into designing this form factor to be safe, accessible, inclusive for riders who can't otherwise ride other vehicles, and really meet the needs of the cities we go into. And yeah.
Thank you. Matt with Ojo. A little bit more, actually, you guys are doing some things with education, both in the app and out of the app, to address these same safety issues. Can you talk a little about how you guys are approaching that?
Sure, thank you. Everything at Ojo starts with safety. and everything about safety starts with our scooter. Hopefully you'll come by and check it out later. But to the question at hand, what we're doing about education, I think all of the panelists will agree that educating the general public as well as our riders is key to any scooter pilot program here in Seattle. And it has to be a combination of efforts. One, obviously, in-app messaging is very important for users when they sign up to understand what the rules of engagement are, not only for the company, but specifically for the city. Each city has different rules of engagement. On top of that, in the markets we operate in, Austin, Dallas, Memphis, and we were involved in a pilot in Hoboken, we have on-the-street OJO ambassadors, which are out there flagging and looking for violations, on the spot, helping people understand what the rules of engagement are, where their scooters belong. OJO scooters were not designed to be ridden on sidewalks. We do not promote them being ridden on sidewalks. They were built for the bike lane and the streets, and I think ongoing education is really important. So in addition to ambassadors, we partner with cities. We do collaborative pop-up events at citywide street fairs. Anytime there's a concert or something going on in the city, we'll have a tent with pop-ups, all about education. Because enforcement's also going to be a very important part of the pilot program. And the more education you do on the front end with the riders, as well as the pedestrians, you can kind of tie that into the enforcement angle with the police department as well.
Thank you very much. This next one is for Katie at Lime. There's been a study out of the CDC partnering with Austin that shows that a vast majority of the injuries that we see from scooter rides happen in those first couple rides. It makes sense, right? Like when you're kids and you learn how to ride a bike, you fall. So what steps is Lime taking to address that learning curve so that people aren't getting hurt those first few rides?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and I think we learned a lot from Portland. Their great survey around, a lot of scooter riders aren't bike riders, right? And that's also significant. That's an educational hurdle. What we do at Lime is we took that CDC study and found a way to, what we feel is an effective way to spend time with people so they feel comfortable in riding a scooter, right? So we have what we call First Ride Academies, which is this idea that if you are a new scooter rider, maybe you've tried a scooter, you haven't felt comfortable enough to ride it in a bike lane or on the street, you want to get a feel for it, you want to understand the rules of the road beyond in-app education, some of the other education we're doing. We will have an hour session where we usually partner with the Bike Coalition or another local organization. We have, an in-person experience. We give away helmets, and we spend time with each person, making them feel comfortable with scooter ridership. And then what we usually do is take them on a tour of the city. Sometimes it's, patronizing small businesses. Sometimes it's a cultural tour. So really tie into the local community and find ways to really promote safety. And then hopefully the idea is they then pass that information along to their colleagues, their family, their friends, and again, pass along that great information, that education they just received.
Thank you. And Ben at Wheels, let's get him a mic. We can't talk about safety really without talking about helmets, and I know you guys are doing some interesting things to try and get more helmets on riders. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can. Thank you for the question. We've heard a lot of talk about who uses scooters. It's great, I think, when you've got people commuting who can take the helmet that they own and use it. But we also have a lot of people from out of town who are probably not traveling with their helmets wherever they go. So I think it's having helmets available as part of the device is a key piece of sort of closing the loop on adoption. And that starts with having technology that allows us to put helmets on the bikes and also encourage usage. So what I'm holding here is a helmet that we intend to, that we're building technology that would incorporate into the bike. It would be unlocked in the same way that you could unlock the bike itself. It has a biodegradable, removable liner inside so that you're not, technically sharing it with the person who used it before you. And it allows us to do creative things like create incentives for people to use the helmet when they're unlocking the bike. The options, I think, are really up to us in partnership with cities to figure out how we want to use this technology. But I think having it as an option in the first place is key. And so that's what we're really excited about bringing to market within the next few months.
Fantastic, thank you. I just want to clarify, Wheels keeps talking about bikes, and it looks like a bike, what they're offering up there.
It's Habit, yes. It is a electric throttle, sort of, it sort of sits in between scooters and bikes based on the regulatory language, so I have a habit of calling it a bike.
Exactly. Okay, so we're gonna move on to talking a little bit more about pedestrian comfort, pedestrian safety, how scooters can impact that. As I'm doing that, I'm gonna put in another plug for food. It's over there, get up, get it, eat. So we know from our bike share program essentially that both parked and ridden bikes can have impacts to people that are walking on the sidewalk or using a wheelchair or might be blind or low vision. And this is going back to Jacob in Portland. What were some of the challenges that you've experienced both in your first pilot and now into your second pilot with impacts of this both with parked and riding devices to people on the sidewalk?
Yeah, this is probably the area that keeps us up at night in managing our scooter program. And when I talk to other cities around the nation, this is one of the things that they worry a lot about as well. You know, I think I want to applaud kind of SDOT staff for a lot of the research and engagement that you did. And when Stefan was talking about some of those findings, I felt like you had spent 3 months talking to my community, because many of those things were the exact same things that we hear with and talk to people about on a regular basis. You know, when we finished our first pilot, I think around safety, we really found kind of 3 things. First, that helmet use was pretty infrequent, if not rare. Second, that poor parking by the users and sometimes poor deployment by the companies on the sidewalk creates real challenges for all sidewalk users, but in particular people who have visual or mobility impairments, as well as, frankly, just our elders. And these are some challenges that I think we continue to try and work with the companies on a regular basis to try and solve. Sidewalk riding has also been an issue. And between the parking and the sidewalk riding, I think this is where we're starting to think more actively about how we can manage the program through geofencing, through no ride zones, through slow speed zones, and through, frankly, enforcement. My colleague Tim Moore came up with me today, who helps enforce user behavior. We've issued over 500 warnings and financial penalties to users for instances of poor parking and sidewalk riding in our most recent pilot. And we're hoping that's going to start to change things, because again, this is the area that keeps us up at night, and this is the reason we're doing a second pilot, not a permanent program.
Thank you very much. We can applaud, yeah. Jacob and I share a lot of conversations about that. And we're so this is for Matt at Ojo. You know, the city, we're still trying to figure out our best approach to how we manage riding on the sidewalk or riding, especially maybe not even on the sidewalk, but in areas that are really heavy pedestrianized, crowded areas. We know you guys offer some solutions to that. You showed me one earlier today. Do you mind talking a little bit how you approach those crowded, kind of either slow zones or no ride zones?
So from a parking standpoint, Ojo's business model is to partner with existing operators, with bike share operators. So in Austin, we partner with Austin B-Cycle, in Memphis with Explore Bike Share. And we do not promote or allow our scooters to be parked on sidewalks. They have to be parked in the confines of an existing bike share structure. So there's no free floating parking, if you will. Additionally, we'll work with the cities, as we've done in Dallas, to create specific scooter parking corrals that are designated for scooter parking out of the pedestrian right-of-way. So that helps to address the parking aspect of the question. As far as speed zones goes, our V2 form, which is here this evening, offers speed controls of 8, 10, 12, 15, 18, and 20. And we did a demo today, and Joel was able to ride on the scooter. It also features audible alerts. So it's not an abrupt change of speed, but it'll warn the rider that you are approaching a restricted speed zone area. Prepare to slow, and it will take you down to 8 or 10 or whatever the designated speed control is. In addition to that, we can also set up restricted zones. So if you don't want scooters here in Seattle to be in parks or specific areas of the waterfront, we can geofence that out completely. The scooter will tell the rider of the warning, and the scooter will shut down as it approaches the restricted area.
Thank you. Ben with Wheels. You know, one of the struggles that we've had with using technology to control this in our bike share program is that the GPS just really isn't accurate enough, especially in the downtown areas. But you've been telling us that you guys can do better, and that you know, rather than 12 to 15 foot accuracy, it's getting down to about 3 feet with your product. Can you tell us about the technology and if it's successful?
Sure. I don't know what's going on with the microphone. I regret to say I'm not sure where the 3 foot number comes from, because I haven't seen that myself. I can say that we are accurate within 2.5 meters. Maybe we have a unit conversion problem, but that's still better than what you quoted as being the industry standard. I think what we have is a combination of leveraging, you know, the user's cell phone and the bike, you know, or our device's GPS to triangulate locations, and we use this very similarly to enforce and/or figure out where devices are and enforce either slow speed or no ride zones. With what we think is good accuracy to make sure that, right, either in a steady state world, if there are places that we don't want devices to be able to get to at all, that we can control speed. We also have the ability to create temporary zones, particularly around sort of major sporting events or special occasions. It's very easy to create sort of temporary geofences or zones that augment sort of excess of devices based on, you know, the needs of the city. So that's what we do with our technology.
Thank you. Maurice, down at the end there. You guys have piloted another approach that I think has become an industry standard since, where users need to take a photo at the end of the ride. How do you think that helps this parking situation and making sure the sidewalk stays safe and accessible?
Yeah, I think that having that image and just that basic, I'll call it muscle memory for the rider, making sure that they are parked properly. I think all of us can describe much of the same sort of technologies in terms of the way that we rebalance our fleets, the way that we are engaging our riders in-app. Being able to leverage that photograph allows us to go back and do forensic analysis when we're seeing trends and issues in certain areas. My colleague Joey Brown's here, who manages our LA market. As you can imagine, we've got about 6,500 vehicles there. Places like Venice, which has a special operating zone, very popular place for riding. I think all of us who operate in LA know that there's high ridership there. Issues for pedestrians, issues for elders, issues for people who are differently able. So we worked diligently with the city on making sure that as we're tracking the infractions, the violations, and things of that nature, that the data that they're showing, the data that we're purveying, matches up with the pictures that are being taken by the riders. So it's been a really great tool for really modeling behavior that we'd like to see. And I think the other piece of that is we've been testing both in Venice as well as in Paris some parking tools that have really shown an incredible trajectory in parking compliance. And when you're dealing with parking compliance, when you're seeing better rates, you know, we can incentivize that with riders or disincentivize riders in certain ways. So it's something that we'd certainly be interested in deploying here.
Thank you for that. Talking about incentivizing and disincentivizing, Donovan with Razor, we know that what we can do with technology and education is only going to go so far, that there will still be some bad actors there, or lazy people or whatnot, that aren't doing the right thing. So what kind of programs are you doing with incentives or enforcement to keep that in check?
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of both positive and negative reinforcements. On the negative reinforcements front, I'll use Portland as an example. The Portland Bureau of Transportation Code Enforcement will document cases of individuals who are riding on the sidewalk or incorrectly parked scooters. They will notify the companies of those enforcements, and then the companies will pass down fines to those users. Using our data, we can basically find out depending on the cases, we can find out whether or not someone was at fault for parking it. Of course, when there's documentation of someone riding on a sidewalk, it's much easier to identify who that was with a greater degree of confidence. So we're able to pass down fines to those users who were documented at fault. On the positive reinforcement side, some of the things that we've discussed with cities include kind of incentivizing in parking. And of course, the GPS challenge is an ongoing challenge that companies are trying to improve every day, but things of incentivizing people to park in certain areas, so kind of the opposite of geofencing, if you will. You're geofencing them to maybe give a discount off their ride if they park in a certain area. And that's kind of out of the way of people in crowded areas. So I think it has to be a combination of both positive and negative reinforcement to kind of really hold users accountable.
Great, thank you guys very much for talking about that. We're going to move on to talking about equity and access a little bit more. Final reminder for submitting questions, and I saw nobody get up when I said get food last time, so you can take it home too, I guess. But if you do have questions, I think Belen there is collecting some, Kelly up front as well, so just throw those up in the air and we'll make sure we get those collected. But we do want to make sure that this program aligns with the city's equity goals. And we share that value with Portland. And so Jacob, what did you learn in the pilot about how scooters work to improve mobility for people with disabilities and also ensure that there's equitable access for people of low incomes and people of color and people that might live in underserved areas of the city?
Thanks, Joel. I think our communities share kind of a lot in common, both around safety and sustainability and reducing congestion and then equity as well. I think learning from our first pilot and moving into our second pilot, one of the things that we heard from the community was wanting different types of scooters where people of different ability levels or different ages would feel more comfortable. And that was where we worked really hard to try and get some companies that had seated scooter options kind of into our market. And I think that's been a really great exercise. In terms of kind of equitable access, one of the things that we require as a city is our providers to deploy a certain percentage of their fleet every day in our kind of equity areas. And we know that these are places that are historically underserved. We have lower income people, more communities of color, and we know that the private sector left unto its own devices wants to be in Venice Beach, and they want to be downtown, and they want to be on our waterfront because that's where the money really is. But as we see these as transportation options, we're wanting to make sure that all members of our community have that access. So placing these requirements in terms of deploying fleet is a way of getting there. And we see that people use them too. I think that's the really important thing. The data that we require the companies to provide us, we can go in and we can see that when we're requiring deployment in certain parts of our city, people are using them there. Whereas other scooters are just not getting deployed in some of these other pockets where we don't have these requirements and there's no ridership there. So I think there really is probably a lot of demand out there, and it's just making sure that you have scooters available for people to use. I think we've also done a lot, real briefly, around trying to work with providers to make sure that the apps are available in multiple languages, the websites are available in multiple languages, there's options for people who don't want to link their credit card to the app. It's where they might be able to pay via cash or pay via text message or those kinds of things. I think there's a lot of creative opportunities where we can all work together to figure out how we're serving kind of all the members in our community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you can applaud. Keon. We've worked together on bike share here in Seattle, and like some of those barriers that Jacob just talked about, we want to make sure that scooters are available, or breaking down barriers, whether those barriers are income, whether it's access to data on your cell phone or really a smartphone at all, whether it's language access, I'm blanking on one, but can you speak to how Jump is addressing those barriers?
Yeah, so first off, providing equitable access to transportation is a core tenet for Jump. And from day one, launching bikes in Seattle, we've made sure that we have a program that is inclusive, accessible, and reliable form of transportation, particularly in the equity areas. So we had a couple of programs to address some of those issues. For example, we have affordable pricing and flexible payment options. As an example, we have a program called Boost that allows qualifying low-income riders to ride for 60 minutes per day for $5 a month. We also have options for low-income riders to pay by cash or unlock their rides without needing a smartphone. The second part of our plan was to ensure that we have bikes available in equity areas, and so we have built that as part of our operations to make sure that we monitor the number of bikes in equity areas. And as you mentioned, we've seen pretty good demand and pretty good response in those areas. Lastly, when we think about marketing and outreach plans, we always think about how do we also include the low income and folks that live in the equity areas. So again, thinking about including multiple languages in our marketing material and really trying to push those low income or say our Boost plan in our marketing material. Overall, we are really encouraged by ridership in equity areas and as well as through our affordable pricing plans.
Thank you. And Tim, how about Spin? What are you guys doing to address some of those same barriers?
Well, first I wanted to sort of give a shout out to Jacob and the city of Portland for all that they're doing to increase access to mobility options. You know, Spin's operating in Portland. We're deploying a certain percentage of our fleet in these equity zones every day. We think it's really important to serve the entire community. We're also participating in the Transportation Wallet program that the city of Portland has to increase access by actually going to these communities and getting folks to sign up to Spin's program to create a more equitable and available mobility option for folks, and that's called Spin Access. So Spin Access is our program that's really geared towards those who are low income, who may not have smartphones or who may not have credit cards. And we have this live in 25 cities across the country. So this is something that we have quite a lot of experience in, and we're really excited about it. You can go on our website to check out more of the details, but in a nutshell, folks who are low income, for example, can either call us at our customer support phone number or go online to fill out an application, and they do need to show evidence through a local, state, or federal program that has a low income requirement that they qualify, but we can get them right onto the app and get them discounted rides. Oftentimes, those discounted rides are about half off. So we're really excited about what we're doing with Spin Access. It's a program that we continue to iterate and improve upon, and we certainly would want additional feedback from every city that we operate in on the Spin Access program, how we can make it better and serve more people in the community.
Thank you very much. One other aspect of availability, and Donovan, this is for you, is that we want these to work for more people. One thing we learned with our bike share program is not everyone can ride a bike, and I think we see with the typical standing scooter, not everyone can ride that scooter. Razor was one of the earlier companies to develop a seated scooter, and can you talk about how you see that addressing some of these accessibility issues?
Yeah, absolutely. As most of you will see after the event, our scooter, the EcoSmart, does have a seat on it. And that was really something that we got really good feedback in the the first market that we deployed those into in San Antonio. And we've really got feedback from people who may not have been comfortable riding a scooter, to have that kind of stability, to be able to sit down for longer periods of time, having that double wide deck, to have their feet side by side, having the air tires, which makes it a bit smoother, going over cracks and bumps in the road. And we see, as this industry has matured, we're starting to see a lot of diversification in all of the companies' hardware, and I think it's great that consumers have a choice, and we're deliberate about having a choice even within our scooter. Our scooter, you can sit down or you can still stand on the scooter if you want to, even with the seat on it. So we really wanted consumers to have that option, but we really found that the seat started appealing to people of all ages, to people of different abilities, and we got really good feedback on that, and it's been popular, and we've pretty much deployed that in all of our markets now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fascinating to see how this whole industry is kind of continued to quickly evolve. And we are curious and concerned at the city that we have this great bike share program. We have heard from people that now they've built bike share into kind of their daily mode choice, and they're coming to depend on it in a lot of ways. And we really want to be thoughtful as we approach scooters. How do we balance the two? So Jacob, back to you. You've had a really successful bike share program for a while, and then scooters came onto the scene. How do you see those two modes in play, and has it detracted from one or not?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I think, again, kind of, going back to some of the information that we're asking the companies to give to us, helps us answer some of these questions. It also helps us plan and create smarter infrastructure for places for people to ride, but it also helps us just understand some pretty basic things. So like in the 8 months between our first pilot and where we're at in our current pilot, we're coming up on a combined total of about 1.5 million total rides, which is really exciting to kind of see. We also know that most of our scooter trips are relatively short, kind of on average of just over a mile. How that compares against our shared bike system, I actually don't have some of that information, because some of the bike share isn't necessarily as technologically advanced as scooters are. But hearing some of the concerns you have, I think it might be warranted for you all to kind of think about this a little bit more. We've definitely seen a decline in our ridership around Biketown, particularly from visitors coming to our city. But that said, we also don't have kind of e-assist. We're just a straight pedal shared bike system. We're going to be bringing e-assist into our market in 2020, and so it'll be really interesting to see then how scooters and bikes stack up. But again, I think there is some excitement around scooters, because we see that we're getting new users in many ways out of automobiles and into more efficient, more climate-friendly ways of kind of getting around. So I think this is a space for Seattle to kind of have some, cautious inquiry as to what might play out.
Thank you. Katie, Lime has been a partner really from the get-go for free-floating bike share, and we've seen Lime move more towards scooters in a lot of markets. How do you see the future of bikes in Seattle kind of overlay with the future of scooters?
Thanks, Joel. So, Seattle, we really appreciate that Seattle e-bikes have become entrenched here. I think they serve, similar to what Jacob was saying, there are nuances in micromobility, right? There are various solutions depending on the distance you have to go. So a scooter is about a mile, right? That's really consistent with a number of markets. It's usually between 0.5 and maybe up to 2 miles is really the sweet spot for scooter share. E-bikes will go a little farther, right? We know that average is certainly over 1 mile. You travel a little farther on an e-bike. And then there's even a 3 to 5 mile solution where you are really looking at a mode shift away from utilization of cars to something that takes you a little farther, right? It's that first mile, last mile, but like plus, right? And so, we greatly find benefit in an e-bike solution. We also acknowledge that, to the surprise of many of us, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, Americans love their scooters. They love them, and the consumer demand is with scooters. In some cases, there are always going to be those people that really enjoy their e-bikes. I do. I even ride jumps. I do enjoy a jump bike as well as a Lime. But by and large, we see up to 3 times, if not more, in many markets, increased demand for scooter share. And so we're looking at is really meeting that consumer demand. And if we're looking at the overall mission, is getting people out of their cars and re-envisioning a way to enjoy their cities, either by walking or taking alternative mode of transportation. It's going to happen in a few different forms. And one of those really crucial forms is scooter share. So.
Yeah, thanks. And Keon, Jump has been here for almost a year now. How do you guys see scooters and bikes working together?
Yeah, so our goal at Uber is to get people from point A to point B by providing various options, whether that's taking a shared ride or in certain cities even purchasing a transit ticket. And here in Seattle, unlocking a bike, we are about providing options. And we are extremely pleased and humbled by the positive response we've seen so far for our bike share offering in Seattle. And we see scooter share as a complement to the service, not a substitute. In cities where we have both bike share and scooter share, we are seeing very little overlap between the user bases for scooters and bike share. We see different trip patterns. We see by area, by time of day, day of week, and even seasons. Both bikes and scooters are strategic for us. We have a long history in designing bikes, and we are now leveraging that history of developing bikes to develop our next generation of scooter share. But we are investing in both product lines, and we believe that's the best way to serve more people in Seattle and serve them more effectively under one platform.
Thank you guys very much. This is super surprising to me, but we're on time. Like, what is up? Okay, we're going to move into the public comment and questions. I have some written questions here, and we'll go over those, and then we'll take some more as well. This first one, we're going to kind of keep it snappy and fast-paced. We'll move down the line. Let's start with Maurice and come back down towards me. In a few words, what is your favorite unique feature of your company's scooter or what you're offering?
Favorite unique feature? Well, I think that the designs of each of the birds has brought a nuance and just a sophistication to the product. And obviously, you guys will have a chance to see the different products behind you later today. One of the things that I appreciate about the Bird One, for example, is we've increased battery size. We've made sure that the vehicle itself, while it's not completely waterproof because it's not a swappable battery, it's actually pretty watertight. Unfortunately, some folks out there have decided that they want to test to see how these birds swim. Jacob is very familiar with stuff in the Willamette River. Generally speaking, we've been able to retrieve those vehicles and clean them up and reuse them in various ways. Some of them ride again. So that's one of the things the resiliency of our vehicle is something that I'm really excited about.
Vehicle resiliency. All right, Kate.
So in 3 words, I would just say authentic community relationships, and just to add a little context to that, we really do pride ourselves on is finding new and interesting ways to really partner with communities that we're in authentically, really. And so one of the ways that we do that is through our Lime Bureau program. So that's in every city here, it's greenways. You can contribute a portion of your ride to a local nonprofit who's doing great work right around sustainability or clean air, or in San Francisco it's the Red Cross, it's helping with the fires, right? And so we consider that a key piece of what we do. We're really excited about that, and certainly we'll continue to find new ways, but yeah, really thrilled about that unique.
Nice, that was more than 3 words. Keon.
Power of the Uber platform. Whether you want to go 0.1 miles or 100 miles, you can use the same platform.
Perfect, thank you.
So for Ojo, I'd say first and foremost, built for the bike lane and streets, off the sidewalks. And I think that's really important here in Seattle and across other cities. Secondly, I'd say our range, our V2, has a 40+ mile range. It's got dual swappable batteries. And the third thing I would talk about is our Audible safety alerts, which I think really help riders, the rider experience. Some scooters are very abrupt when they downshift in speed. I think the safety alerts are gradual and enhance safety.
So I'd say partnership is the thing at Spin that we're most committed to in terms of our core mission. I spoke about the vehicle quite a bit, but I also wanted to go back to what I was mentioning about Spin Hubs, and these are our dedicated parking structures that we put in communities that also are able to charge the scooters themselves. So this is fantastic. This cuts down on clutter. This cuts down on vehicles blocking the sidewalk, especially in high demand areas such as transit centers. And then the other great thing about these Spin Hubs is the fact that we don't have to drive our vans around as much to pick up these vehicles, so it reduces VMT.
Yeah, so 3 things related to our vehicle. One of them is that they are very sturdy feeling, comfortable, and very predictable when you ride them. Again, we also have a large range, like Ojo, of over 40 miles per charge. We do also use swappable batteries. And the last, and one of the most important to us, is that they've been built to handle all conditions, whether it be weather, road conditions, train tracks. They're safe in all of them, and they're predictable.
I'd say the biggest thing for us is, to put it in 2 words, deliberate growth. We don't just want to go to a new city to check it off a list and say we've been to a new city. We want to go to a city because we believe that it will be a successful program in that city. And I think one of the biggest indicators of that is how residents feel about it. Do residents accept this into their lives? And will it be a successful program and a sustainable program in the long term? And then one other small thing that I'll just mention about our scooter itself that we find unique and convenient is that it has a basket on it. And we found a lot of feedback of everyone's carrying something nowadays, whether it's a briefcase, groceries, a purse, you name it, cup holders in the basket, don't try drinking a cup of coffee while you're scootering. It's not safe, but you can get a cup of coffee, put it in your cup holder, and then drink it when you get to your destination. So, a unique feature of our scooter.
I said in the intro, but I'll repeat it here. Wheels is safe, sustainable, and accessible. But rather than repeat all that, I'll say that I mentioned we're sort of the in-between. We have a lot of characteristics of scooters with the electric throttle, but we also have the form factor, the comfort and stability of the bike. I think both of which combines to make that a really fun, enjoyable vehicle to use for getting around city, while checking off many of the, while committing, leaning into safety and sustainability.
Yeah, sure.
As I think about it, I think from a city perspective, I think data transforms how we deliver value to our community. All of a sudden, we now have real robust information about how people are getting around, and we can use that to have really hard conversations within our agency and with others about, hey, look, there are a bunch of scooters going down Hawthorne Boulevard, and we know that scooter users are like bike users, and maybe we need to think about getting rid of a lane of traffic and building a scooter lane or eliminating some parking. These are the kinds of things that, as we're taking some of the information, which we're really working with a lot of people to kind of protect personal privacy on, but getting it in the hands of our planners to make smarter decisions in order to serve our community members, I think is really, really exciting.
Great, thank you. So prices for bikes in Seattle have gone way, way up. It was, when we started the bike share pilot, actually one company was free for a while. But the rise in the cost for bike share has made it so some trips are now not really competitive from a price standpoint with bus rides, taxi rides, things like that. How about Tim? Where do you see trip pricing stabilizing? Does that have to do with average trip price, average trip distance? How do you see Spin's role in making sure that people want to choose this mode?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we're seeing definitely is that people are using these vehicles, people are using scooters to get to transit stops. So making sure that Spin can really fit into that trip planning that people do when they want to go to work or when they want to go to school, making sure that Spin can offer a ride at an affordable price to everyone. I mentioned the Spin Access program is a way that we can further discount the rate of a ride for people who have low income or people who may just not have the ability to pay full price for a lot of other sorts of rides. So I think that's definitely something to think about. You know, how as a company can we go ahead and expand the transportation options for people who want to get to where they're going?
Thank you. Maurice, I'm going to have you take a crack on that same question as well. And I'm going to go a little farther with that. You know, we love the low income options that a lot of the companies offer and that we'll require in our plan, in our permit. But if prices keep rising as we've seen in the past year, I think this could quickly become a mode that works either if you qualify for a low income plan or if you're kind of a tech worker in the top 5%. How are you going to ensure that kind of your average Seattleite can use one of these, can use a scooter?
Thank you for the question. I think a couple of things. We also offer a Bird Access program. We offer programs, for example, in San Francisco to teachers, students, folks who work at 501c3 nonprofits. So we take a pretty broad look across markets, but we also take a surgical look at a market and make sure that we're being responsive to the consumers in that market. Like everyone else has described, we have partnerships with local organizations. We get a better feel for the organizations, for the individuals that are being served, for the riders that we have. We do rider surveys, so we are hearing direct feedback from our consumers, constituents, and cities about their experience, whether that they think the pricing is much too high or they feel like it's just right. We do price testing like any other industry does to make sure that we're hitting that sweet spot. A conversation we have with cities often is, we want to work with you on your fee structure. We want to work with you on the way that you are, I'd say, adjudicating violations and things of that nature, because that has a cost to it as well. So those are all things that we take into consideration as we enter into markets, as we continue to mature with our relationship with the city, with the relationship with the consumers, the riders that we have, making sure that our pricing is matching the need for the communities that we're serving.
Thank you very much. This next question is actually for me. The question is, will Seattle draw from the multitude of best practice recommendations as recently identified by the September 2019 NACDO report on guidelines for regulating shared micromobility? And yeah, it's yes. We work closely with NACDO. We took a very active role in writing their first version of that last year. We helped review the version that they published this year. We go to speak to other cities and really use those tools that we have like NACDO to make sure that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel every time here, that we're learning from other cities, we're learning from great organizations like NACDO so that we can keep this moving forward so that scooters will address our goals. So thank you for that question. Okay, this has to do with charging. I understand that scooters need to be recharged frequently and they're often picked up using gas-powered vehicles. How does this fit into the overall sustainability model? Katie, I'll let you take that one to start.
It's a really great question. We are coming at it a few different ways. One is acknowledging that there is like any industry, and a ways to go, right? We as an industry continue to get more sustainable overall. We're all in. So we've hired a head of sustainability. What does that mean? We're taking a look at our hardware. We're taking a look at operations. We're taking a look at every facet of the company to make sure that what we're doing is as sustainable as possible, right? We're recycling our scooters. We are making sure that we're managing waste at our warehouses. We are with our juicer program, which is our, chargers on the street, that when they are picked up, there is some efficiencies there, right? So what we're also doing on the operations side is utilizing e-trikes. So we have those in a number of markets now, increasing as time goes on, and looking at e-vehicles, right, to then rebalance our scooters and pick them up in the field. So all that to say, we continue to improve. I think there's a ways to go, and we're really taking a hard look at improving our efficiencies and operations, but we're getting there, and we're really excited about the future.
Thanks. How about Ben? Does Wheels add a lot of vehicle gas-powered miles to the road?
Thank you. I mentioned our swappable batteries. That's a key piece of that is meant to specifically reduce the number of miles needed to service, rebalance, and otherwise maintain our fleet of vehicles. We are able to keep our bikes out on the road and very efficiently swap batteries for everyone that's low, which means that whereas a van would fill up with some number of bikes and need to be making frequent drops to some central warehouse, we're able to deploy or keep our fleet charged. Batteries are much smaller to transport, and swapping them out is quite quick and efficient. And that also means that the bikes are available for use, which means there are fewer bikes needed to maintain our coverage of the city. All of which is meant to say that we don't spend a lot of miles just moving bikes around for either charging purposes or maintenance purposes. Everything is designed to keep the bikes available, charged, in working order for the public to use at their disposal.
Thank you very much. We actually have a question coming from Marcy in the audience.
Okay, yes, it's on, thank you. So a couple things. First, I want to acknowledge, Joel, that we appreciate the work that you've been doing with the disability community, and we have a long ways to go. My name is Marcy Carpenter. I spent my adult life advocating for alternatives to the single occupancy automobile. So I'm glad to see these programs coming. I'm going to call a couple of you out. To jump and line, the bike's chair is still not working here. I might generously describe it as less horrible, but it has a long ways to go. And I have a colleague in Redmond who works at Microsoft who recently took a picture of a scooter in the middle of the sidewalk, completely blocking her path, sent it to the company, and the response she got was, "What's wrong with that?" So I hope you'll educate your customer service people so that they never ever give that response again to someone. So you all also need to look at, and I think some of the companies are, how to make your reporting systems accessible to blind people. So how can I use the screen reader on my telephone to access your website, to access the reporting system? But even if I could do that, we're not talking about me going from home to this meeting and finding one misparked vehicle. We're talking 3 or 5 or 10. And so I don't have time to take the time out to find the label, the right label, and to report it, even if it was accessible. So I also want to know, just for the city of Seattle to think about, what kinds of ordinances, what kinds of rules are you considering for parking enforcement?
Thank you, Marcy. We know we need to do more. I think we're very comfortable saying that. We don't see even one bike or scooter that makes it more difficult for someone with a disability to move around the city. It can't work. This can be a program that makes it easier for a lot of us to get around, but harder for people that already have a really hard time getting around the city. And so we're looking at different strategies, like what Portland's doing. And maybe Ben can actually talk a little bit about your some of the enforcement strategies that you have. But we'll keep working at it and we'll keep iterating on it. I think sort of worldwide where this is right now is cities are trying a lot of different things. And we'll see what's working, and we're going to keep iterating, talking to other cities, and seeing what are the best methods to make sure that what you described doesn't happen. But Ben, maybe you want to talk a little bit about kind of your specific enforcement strategy?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jacob. Sorry. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. I think, is it Marcy? Yeah, Marcy, I think these are some of the exact same conversations we have with members of our community as well. And I get the complaints on a daily basis and the photos on a daily basis and reach out to the providers on a daily basis to try and get some of these things corrected. I think where we are starting to see some progress is, as we've been able to have kind of enforcement kind of in the field. Again, my colleague Tim is up here with me, and we were talking with SDOT earlier about some of our practices of actually having staff out in the field, documenting these instances and issuing fines. We've also started to have conversations with other cities that are hiring companies that are essentially being like towing companies for scooters. Down in San Diego and Dallas and a few other markets are exploring this, and we're exploring it as well because like the city of Seattle, I think we're interested in having scooters improve mobility for all people and not necessarily at the cost of some. And so I think it's a really important thing, and realistically, I think it's all the folks to the left of me that need to answer this question because it's their scooters and their users that are causing many of these challenges.
Anybody want to take it? Raise a hand. Katie, thank you.
It's flashing. Okay, here you go.
Hi, Marcy. This is Matt from OJO. This one's definitely working. We spoke briefly before the meeting. We're a young company. We're we're only in 3 cities, and I think our approach to it is the corrals and bike stations. So that it's not a free-floating system. It's not going to solve everything, but I think it's a good step towards having more order and leaving these sidewalks and the public right-of-way more accessible for all.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, in Santa Monica, where we're headquartered, one of the experiments that we've been working with them on, and we've seen this repeated in other cities, is actually starting the rides in the street. So for the parking facilities are in the street.
I'll speak loudly. If the parking facilities are in the street, the rider is more likely to continue to ride
In the street, in the bike lane. I know that the Seattle City Council had, maybe it's working. Thanks. I know that the Seattle City Council, I believe, had explored a resolution on having SDOT.
Going to do it this way. Having SDOT do some analysis on putting corrals in the street, and I think that's something, I can't remember who said it earlier about the data. Because of the data that we're able to generate and share with cities, they're getting to see new ideas around trip planning behavior, where the investments for safe infrastructure should be in cities. So I think for us, to Marcy's question, we're really, I think the industry, but certainly Bird, is really concerned about these issues, trying to work diligently with community members in all the markets that we exist in, because we want to be a true community partner and are invested in making sure that users and non-users feel like this is working for them as well.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. It is We are right on time. It is 7:40, which moves us into our kind of time that we can just have a little less formal interactions. But before we wrap up, I want to again thank everyone for being here. Thank you for coming on a weekday evening to learn about scooters, and thank you to our panelists for being here. A lot of them flew in from outside of the city, and so really thank you for that. We will, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to come up and ask us or ask one of the panelists in this next 20 minutes. If you have any comments that were submitted, we'll make sure we record those. But I do want to again reiterate that we still have a survey open. So if you actually, probably the easiest way right now is if you Google SDOT Scooter Share Program, it'll bring you to our webpage, and then we have a link to the survey there. Let's see, I want to acknowledge that we are working on stolen land here. That this is land, and the right-of-way that we keep talking about was from the Duwamish people, and we want to honor them. And then just let's keep talking. We'll, like Stefan said, we're going to be moving into actually trying to come out with some decisions after we wrap up this conversation. So with that, let's you guys can head back to your tables. People can get up, and Stefan and I are also here for questions. Thank you again for coming.
A couple of questions, and I thought there'd be an opportunity to be able to ask people to respond to them publicly.
That was the written questions were for that. But you can always ask us questions individually or kind of to the vendors themselves. I also want to reiterate that we do get physically kicked out of here at 8. So when you see us start to say, "Hey guys, let's go," we need to go. But thank you again, and thanks for coming.